session number 2 on day 2 of hearing stream 3 dealing with the rural zone. Next submitter that we have up is Submitter 80, Adamson Shaw, represented by Lucy McWilliam and Mike Shaw. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
We have a statement of evidence prepared by you, Lucy, dated the 29th of September, which has been pre-circulated. How do you want to handle this? Do you want to give us the high-level summary of that? And then
Yeah, I'll take it as read, and then I've just got a few speaking points to the main submissions, but it's all coming out of the main.
Just before you do that, you familiarised yourself with Mr. Hurrell's summary statement?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And have you had an opportunity to hear the hearing over the last day and a bit?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Been a lot of discussion about rural subdivision.
Yes.
And a lot of some homework set for the reporting officers to come back on some number of matters.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes. Kia ora, my name is Lucy McWilliam and I'm a senior planner for Adamson Shaw. I will briefly run over our main submission points and then I'll pass it over to Mike Shaw. So Adamson Shaw's key submission points are primarily confined to the subdivision chapter, in particular lot size standards for the general rural zone, the appropriateness of the rural lifestyle zone, and the inclusion of Masterton into Rule Sub R4, which addresses the subdivision of land less than 4 hectares in the general rural zone. Adamson Shaw opposed the 40 hectare minimum lot size standard for the general rural zone. In particular, we believe there should be provision for smaller lot subdivision on land that is not identified as being highly productive and where the balanced lot meets minimum lot size standards. We believe that landowners, particularly farmers, are being unfairly disadvantaged by this rule, as historically the creation of limited small lots has proven to be an integral part of furthering the development of farms and farm succession planning. Limiting the use of all land in the general rural zone to large blocks solely for the purposes of primary production is particularly limiting and fails to acknowledge that there are circumstances where small lot subdivision is appropriate, particularly where they support the economic and social well-being of rural communities. The reality is that not all rural land is considered productive. Secondly, Adamson Shaw opposed the proposed rural lifestyle zone. This zone, as it is currently mapped, is unable to provide sufficient lifestyle development opportunities for Masterton for the next 10 years. This is further reduced when we consider that all the properties in Ardsley Lane have a no subdivision clause registered on their titles. Mr. Horrell notes that as covenants can be lifted, this should not be a deciding factor in the appropriateness of rezoning this land. I note here that land covenants are a legally binding agreement that impose certain restrictions or requirements. While councils do not have to consider them when assessing resource consents, I think it would be short-sighted to ignore this when it will have a real impact on the overall potential yield of lots in the rural lifestyle zone. The rural lifestyle zone is also inconsistent with the manner in which the Carterton and South Wairarapa propose to manage lifestyle development. Why is Masterton different? The map in Appendix 9 of Mr. Horrell's Section 42A report does not show the distribution of sub-4 hectare lots to be any more widespread in Masterton than Carterton or South Wairarapa. Mr. Horrell proposes deferring further decision-making on rural lifestyle opportunities to a future plan change. We consider that there are better ways to manage rural lifestyle development in a coordinated and consistent approach across the Wairarapa and believe this should be done through the inclusion of Masterton in Rule Sub R4. We also have concerns around the ability to dispose of stormwater and wastewater in the rural lifestyle zone, which Mike will touch on further. Pass it over to Mike.
Before you do, a number of those things are matters that we've asked, that we've heard from on last day, and we've asked told to reconsider and come back to us on the rural lifestyle matter. We asked Mr. Hurrell to explain the reason why there was a difference between the approach to Masterton and the approach between South Wai and Carterton. And seems that the answer to that is that originally there was an intention to treat all three districts in an even-handed manner, and that with the HPL becoming a national planning standard in final form as opposed to a draft form, and including LUC Class 3 land, when the draft was only looking at LUC 2, that created for Mr. Hurrell a difficulty in trying to find cohesive areas of rural lifestyle zoning, Carterton and South Wairarapa, and hence they went to the rural approach and sub 4. There wasn't the same case, according to Mr. Hurrell, for Masterton. It was possible to identify a spatial area in a zone that didn't have the same limitations as in the other two districts. So that there's not a question there. That's just, I'm just repeating the answer that's been given to us to date.
And I did make a comment in my evidence that maybe that's not the case anymore. Originally that was identified as being a suitable place, and maybe since that decision's been made, the area's been reduced with the highly productive land assessment, which has further reduced it. We know that regional council have raised some issues around freshwater quality, the size of the lots, and the drinking.
We heard from them yesterday. I don't know if you.
I did listen in on that one, yeah. So I guess.
What's your takeaway from that? Because the regional council presented on a couple of occasions. In one case, of asking for an avoidance, and originally they said they opposed the rural lifestyle zoning.
Yes.
And they were wanting all the eggs in the intensification basket, if you like, in the townships. They've sort of resolved from that now and said, well, we're not opposed to rural lifestyle zone, but maybe the minimum allotment size needs to increase.
Yeah, and I think that links into our point or our concerns with the ability to dispose of wastewater and stormwater efficiently, which Mike will go into further. But I know that it's a controlled activity under the regional council for that drinking area, but there are still conditions that have to be met for it to be a controlled activity. So I'm not sure it's going to be as easy as, well, it's a controlled activity, it will be granted.
The panel's well aware of one thing to talk about the activity status, the other is talk about the practicality of achieving disposal on a 5,000 square metre.
Yes.
A lot. We have asked Mr. Hurrell to provide some further information on the spatial distribution of land around Masterton. So that's on his agenda also. And just finally, sorry, Mr. Shaw.
No, you're right.
Just trying to provide some context over what I.
It may actually help you because I won't read verbatim what I've got written there. Then you've already heard it.
It's a sort of attempt for the panel to reconcile their views and what we've heard, because it's received a lot of information. In terms of the options for dealing with the Masterton RLZ zone, I think you support option 2, don't you?
Yes, including Masterton in the sub 4 hectare.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that with the retention of the area out rural lifestyle zone or without their retention?
Without. There are a number of lots in the rural lifestyle zone that would be able to be subdivided in the sub 4 hectare zone. So there would be areas within that could be subdivided under the new rule. But yes, I think it should.
So option 1 and option 2 concurrent is not a goer.
I don't think so. My issue with option 3 is I think we need to consider it now, and that we've got real concerns about the area as a whole, and that this is the time now to be identifying those areas for lifestyle development, as opposed to deferring it and then maybe finding that a rural lifestyle zone isn't the right option for a later plan change, and it's maybe a bit too late then to consider some of those others. So I think it should be done now.
Okay. Thanks for the indulgence in that.
Thank you. My name is Mike Shaw. I'm a licensed cadastral surveyor and director of Adamson Shaw Limited. Have over 25 years professional planning, surveying and development engineering experience, which ranges from Christchurch to through to Taupo and in particular Wellington and Wairarapa regions. I won't, as I mentioned, I won't go back over a lot of this because you've obviously heard a lot of it before. I suppose for us, there's two main aspects of it in terms of the rural lifestyle zone, because when we look at grouping large numbers of 5,000 square metre sections together from reasonably vast experience, that's not a rural lifestyle. That is roofs upon roofs upon roofs with no space. If you looked at Milford Downs and Ardsley Lane now, they are approximately both about 21 1 hectare lots. And it's the use of the word space, I believe, is key when you're looking at rural lifestyle. What you are creating with a rural lifestyle zone that's proposed is it's quasi-residential in nature. You will have large amounts of hardstand area. You'll have wood sheds, everything that goes associated with having a slightly larger section, but it's not going to have any residential services, and it's going to have rural standard roading. So when you look at something like Ardsley Lane and Milford Downs, which are fully developed now, our belief is that what you are looking at is a rural lifestyle development. If you go and halve that and double the amount of lots in there, that is not a rural lifestyle. Sure, it might appeal to some people, but it's not providing for what we felt going into the process could be provided for, and it has been provided for with the sub 4 rule, with the sub 4 hectare rule, which much better provides for some forms of rural development in appropriate areas. And I suppose that's the key as well. Believe it or not, we're not really all about cutting up land. The best things that you can do is where it's appropriate. And it's also worth remembering that the market dictates what happens. So if you get the rules right, when the market tries to do something that you might not like, you can constrain it. So if we look at the 4 hectare rule that was in the operative plan, or was in the operative plan, that was always potentially going to be a problem, which probably no one envisaged at the time. And I was in the process for the previous district plan. And when there was a restriction on the number of small lots, yep, that's fine. It's appropriate. You can do some 1 hectares and you've got some scope. It allows people some flexibility, but there was no cap on the 4 hectare lots. So you have something unforeseen come along, like a market that's fueled by a COVID event where no one could leave the country, a lot of money was available, and we did a huge amount of 4 hectare lots because there was no cap on them. Not the best use of land, but that's the property owner's right, and it's the rules at the time. So if you can get the rules structured in a way that allow, in our view, better flexibility, and that's in our submission, and also restrictions upon what a market might try to dictate, I think you're headed in the right direction. In terms of this lifestyle zone, which we are opposed to, got some real issues with the location of this zone, let alone just the concept of it in itself. So the location of the zone in itself is in terms of the soils with respect to soakage, in particular stormwater and on-site effluent disposal, is unsuitable for large numbers of 5,000 square metre unserviced lots. The area to be rezoned is entirely unsuitable for this level of intense development relying on on-site disposal. For example, the Ardsley Lane subdivision, which is a 20-lot, 1 hectare development, so 21 hectares, had to present a comprehensive engineering investigation on sewer and stormwater disposal in 2007 during the consenting process. And that was done by Glass and Potts Fowler out of Palmerston North, which is held by council, obviously. That report noted on-site effluent disposal, whilst possible on 1 hectare sites, had to be carefully designed due to the issues with the site in terms of soils and potential runoff. The GPF investigations confirmed that the soil profile below topsoil levels, so below the top 300, let's say, was generally a partially cemented layer of dense, light-coloured silty clay. So the word clay is the issue. The Lansdowne area is well known to have issues with clay underlying soils, with poor or little drainage. And that's the whole of Lansdowne. Basically, it's a mountain of clay. And the entire area proposed for this new zone is on those soils. On-site effluent disposal systems have failed, and I know that from personal experience, and many residents in Ardsley Lane struggle with septic fields becoming bogs. In addition, the area has a naturally high groundwater table due to these low permeability soils. Further, the GPF report notes stormwater runoff over the subdivisions will be increased. This was at the time of applying for the subdivision. As wastewater is to be treated and disposed of within the subdivision area, it will add additional loading to the soil and groundwater system. This is being borne out in actual fact. This will increase soil moisture levels and potentially lead to greater runoff. That has occurred. Stormwater paths from the area lead to adjoining properties, and from there generally lead toward either the Ruamahanga River to the east or into the urban area of Masterton, which already experiences problems with capacity during heavy rainfall events. I think this is a key point from our point of view. There is little to no opportunity to utilise on-site soakage in this zone. And I know that from personal experience because I live there. Once a soak pit is full, obviously, it is useless and will do nothing. And that can happen in summer or winter, because when you're on clay soils, in winter it's obviously heavy and wet, and then the soil moisture content builds up above the clay and water doesn't travel across the top of the clay level. It just builds back up in the soil. And you get, basically, you'll lose a shoe walking across it. And in summer, it's hard and dry, and so you don't get rid of the water either. It's just like filling up a soap dish. So Ardsley Lane stormwater runs off into various catchments via watercourses or channels, including the road swale. There is no on-site stormwater soakage available. Significantly increased hardstand and roof areas plus roading from this proposed higher density quasi-rural zone will create an issue for this council, for the Marsden District Council, that we believe no one looking at the creation of the zone is fully appreciated. We do, however, note that council has enough records and staff knowledge to know that this will be an issue. In our view, this would not be an issue if the sub 4 hectare, sub R4 rule in the South Wairarapa and Carterton were to be utilised in Masterton. This rural lifestyle zone is poorly thought out in our view, given the proposed density of development and the nature of the soils in the zone. It is also not rural in any real way, but more residential in nature. However, that's already been discussed. I would like to note, actually, that it's from a lot of people's perspective, it's quite disappointing that the Environment Court decision covered the rural lifestyle zone, because the outcome of that is, I believe, not what was intended. This is not merely a change of rural rules that we're talking about. This is an entirely new zone that we haven't had in the Wairarapa before. It's not often done. The density hasn't been seen before, and it's not proposed anywhere else, which, as we've pointed out, we believe has some pretty major flaws.
When you say the Environment Court decision, you mean the legal effect?
Giving that zone legal effect has a lot of flow down issues, which I'm sure you're aware of. Thank you.
I've got some generic questions, but before I do, let's just see what my colleagues have for you.
Okay. So you talk about this rural lifestyle zone in Marsden, and as the densities that are planned are not appropriate. Is there any density there that you would deem to be appropriate?
Yes. So if you look at the rural lifestyle zone, and I don't have the number of potential fully developed lots that we could do or could be done in the rural lifestyle zone, but it will be in the hundreds. That density will be at an average of 5,000 square metres, whereas currently you can't. If you looked at Ardsley Lane and Milford Downs, the density there is 1 hectare. which is significantly different. If you look at the sub R4 rule for subdividing less than 4 hectare blocks, if you just looked at the block that you were subdividing as an island, the density there will also be, even doing 2 5,000 square metre lots, the density will be no worse than 1 hectare as an average. And they will be pockets of development where I believe the terminology was used where the horse is already bolted, where those blocks can be. So what you're doing is you're spreading it out, and you're not creating that lack of space, which I think is key.
So you would believe 1 hectare.
From my experience around the countryside and around the country, 1 hectare has a rural feel, and it is that is a lifestyle. You're not farming a hectare. If you're lucky, you're not mowing it, but you're not living with a roof right there, which you can easily do on 5,000 square metres. Yeah. They have a feel of it's more residential than rural, definitely.
I'm good. You haven't sort of talked about your opposition to the 40 hectare minimum in the rural zone, or is that coming up as a second part?
No, a question I had too.
Yeah.
Because there has been a focus largely on the RL head.
Yeah, the opposition to that was not necessarily the 40 hectares. It's that in addition to the 40 hectare, there should be the ability for large blocks of lands to take off a small piece of land, similar to the rule that's in the operative plan, where you could take off a maximum of 2 1 hectares as long as you had a balanced lot of a certain size. So it's not necessarily the 40, but it's having the ability to do some of those.
Even I think summarise that where you.
If we were able to write the rule, just say if we were able to write that rule, and at the moment you can do on complying land, you can do 2 1 hectare lots and a complying balance, which actually is only 4 hectares under the operative rule. So if we had the 40 hectare or whatever the outcome's going to be for a balanced lot, we do think it's almost doing a disservice to those landowners who are farming that land, and they are the custodians of that land, that they can't at least do on an appropriately zoned bit of dirt 1 or 2 smaller blocks. So when I looked at the rule, I thought, well, why don't we just, if you want to do a 5,000 square, why don't you allow them to do 2 5,000s? Or if you're worried about that, let them do 1. At least it lets some, I mean, usually the reason we're doing this is for succession planning. And that's been borne out for the last 25 years working in Wairarapa. There are many cases where bits of dirt get cut up for development blocks, but in general, when you're talking about farming families and their ability to, they reinvest, anything they do is usually reinvested in farming. So the best thing is when you can do your succession planning, you can put mum and dad in a new house, and if they want to live on the farm or live in that location, they can. If your option is doing it on a 40 hectare block, that's not going to happen. It's not financially viable. So you have to take the land value out, and by the time you build them a house, and it happens frequently, and you're taking quite a lot of value out of a farm and putting it into the corner in a new build on a smallish bit of dirt. So even if you decided to get rid of the 1 hectares and take them down to 5,000s, there's another hectare that's not being utilised. It's still in the balanced farm.
Yeah.
The proposed plan that was notified, what's the closest out?
There's not.
Nothing.
There's nothing. You can do redundant farmhouses or whatever.
I was just literally just going to ask that, and
Yes.
at what stage does what you're suggesting then become a redundant farmhouse proposal? That
Well, again, it goes back to let's get some appropriate mechanisms in place in a rule that can restrict the things that you can't foresee. And you can only do so much of that, but I think it's key that you allow the landowners the ability to do something, because if you're looking at a lot of farms, they either have 1 or maybe 2 houses on them, usually not that new. Quite often one's a smallish cottage. So if you want to get mum and dad off the farm and they still want to live in that area, you're going to build them a new house on a small bit of dirt that isn't highly productive soils, and it gets taken off on the corner of the farm or whatever.
My question is that, do you need to create a new title for that?
Well, if you want lending, you do.
Live on my-
You know, you do if you want lending. And most farms have got mortgages, so I don't see it's, yeah, if you want bank lending, it's
So you need
based on title.
for-
Yeah, you need titles. Yeah, or the ability to obtain a title. If they're willing to lend, you would need to be able to prove that you could get a title,
Yeah.
which again is the same in actual fact.
The suggestion that was made for the making provision by either one or two minimum 5,000 square metre allotment with a minimum balance of 400, is that in addition to or the surplus farmhouse provision?
Well, I mean, we've got either or rules in the district plan at the moment. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you can work it if you worked it in and you did an either or. You're still looking at a 5,000 square metre minimum around a surplus dwelling anyway.
Question either or.
Yeah, I mean, you could cover things with either or, and there's other ways to prevent wholesale carving up. I mean, the issue is fragmentation of land. So, you know, some of the ways that actually worked in the operative district plan to date, we're putting timeframes on things or date stamping or time limits, so that one bite of the cherry and all of those sorts of things. So there are ways and means that it can be easily done.
Well, Mr. Orrell's going to report back on the surplus farm dwelling provision. So we might ask him to also consider this option discussed in paragraph 11. Okay. My final two. Is there anything on the 40 hectares?
Yeah, well, I just want to bring up a question for you, Mike, and Lucy, thanks for your presentation. The building on top of a hill with minimum size lots of 5,000 squares on a clay pan doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I'm just concerned about obviously all the wastewater systems and that would have to be consented, and the amount that are, as you say, have already said, they're all in one area. But I'm more concerned about the runoff that's possibly going to occur for the downhill residents that are already there, and obviously it's a GW consenting process. Have you had any experience of as you say, you live up there, Mike, of runoff into those gullies or anything in that?
Well, so for Ardsley Lane, the stormwater system is utilising the gullies.
Yep.
There's no on-site soakage. Or you utilise the roadside swale, which then travels via gravity to various ponds through private properties and finds its way back north to south flow towards Masterton. So at those lot numbers, that's not an issue. But if you're looking at the potential lot numbers of a zone like this, plus including Ardsley Lane and Milford Downs and that, so there's another 40, 42 or whatever it is, I fail to see how you won't notice it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Two final questions for me, Mr. Shaw. Firstly, issues of covenants. You're a registered surveyor. You understand about
Yes.
they operate. Firstly, do they apply to both Milford and Ardsley Lane, or just one? Both.
The Milford Downs, some of the sections have relatively elderly covenants, which are not as strong. I would offer as the Ardsley Lane ones, which are pretty watertight. In saying that, they're all private covenants, so technically, if you could get everyone on side,
Yes.
but that would be not my experience of how things work.
And it's the Ardsley Lane is a no subdivision covenant.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Effectively that.
That's it. But unless everyone parties to that covenant agreed to remove it from the title.
So if there is agreement, what's the process that's followed? Does it involve the council or the DLR or?
It doesn't seem to involve council. It's
No.
private. It becomes a court issue.
Yes.
It's very messy, but the outcome will be that there's no subdivision. Yeah.
It's good. And just finally, a planning question. Is there any case to be made that the rural lifestyle zone is a better reflection of what's on the ground, particularly at Elsley and Milford, than what the rural general zone anticipates? Is there a case to be made along those lines
That the proposed zone is reflective of what's there now?
what's there on the ground now, which Mr. Lewis said, is basically 21 hectare allotments in each development, isn't that correct?
Approximately 2021.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're all 1 hectare lots, which I agree with Mike, that is rural lifestyle in my opinion. If you're dropping it down to 5,000, I don't think that's.
Okay, so is it appropriate to actually, does that actually reflect the aspirations of the rural zone? That what's on the ground at the moment?
No. Oh, what's on the ground at the moment?
Yes.
Yes, I do think that zone, those areas, particularly that are developed, have a rural or display some rural characteristics. I mean, they're certainly not primary production as the current zoning, which is rural primary production. I mean, it's clearly not that, but it's certainly in terms of, open space and those sorts of things that we associate with rural, it would be now.
There are paddocks with sheep in them.
Yes.
Question. Just a bit of follow-up to that. We've had a lot of submissions about us talking about the 1 hectare thing as well. If we're inclined to go that way, would there be enough sub 4 hectare sites around the Masterton area to compensate for the loss of the extra sections that we would lose? Do you think?
Yes, there was some numbers that were run in, I think, Mr. Horrell's report, and I may have referenced them in my evidence, but yes, I believe there would be. Yeah, enough.
And in your submission, that would give a much more rural flavour to the whole of Masterton rather than just these one or two sites.
So, Horrell, that was something on your agenda, just checking that was
Yes,
going to come back to us on.
I can possibly answer that now
Yes.
if you'd like. So there would be an additional, need to do my math there. One moment, I might just use my calculator to look at the difference there. $292 allotments, but less than 4 hectares that would be enabled in Masterton.
Okay. 292.
Right.
Thank you for that.
So it would be, to the 1 hectare would be roughly about,
Yes.
you produce roughly about the same number of sections anyway.
Sorry, was that in relation to the 1 hectare in the rural lifestyle zone? Or?
Yeah, so at the moment, in the rural lifestyle zone, the minimum is half a hectare.
Yes.
If we were inclined to get rid of the rural lifestyle zone and go to the sub 4 hectare rule across the districts, as has been suggested, would we still be providing for the same number of potential sections in a rural environment?
Yes. Compared with the rural lifestyle zone as notified, it would be more. 292 is greater than the 230 odd that it currently enables. That is, however, less than what the 10-year demand is. It's around 350. So
Both are less than the 10-year
Wait,
demand.
that's right.
So Marston's still got to find more.
That's right.
So, okay.
Obviously there's a bit of planning that I'm not aware of. Why do we have to find the space for rural lifestyle?
Let Mr. Horrell explain that.
Yes, it's the strategic direction requires opportunities to be enabled for lifestyle, which the interpretation I've taken is that needs to enable sufficient opportunities in the 10-year period that the plan will
Right. Okay, so slightly digressing. If we're looking at the 40 hectare thing and we're talking about coastal area, which is, in my view, a pretty good lifestyle. The minimum area there's 40, isn't
40
it?
hectares.
So we're shutting down, or there's obviously a lot going on coastally as well. But I think you should be feeding that into the equation as well. Like, why are we shutting down our ability to do anything in terms of some sort of a lifestyle coastally? And we're just putting it all onto the production land.
I don't know if any submitters raised that issue.
We did in our
We
original
did,
one.
yeah.
Coastal.
We opposed the
Opposed
40
to 40
hectares.
hectares.
Yeah. I was assuming that would come in a later hearing, maybe, is it? To address.
Hearing string.
Look at the coastal environment here in stream.
Okay.
But if
That's for,
like I can respond to that in my right reply. We'll talk through
yes.
that as I can.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, that's a live point then. Thank you for that. On that basis, I think, thank you for your presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have the New Zealand Heavy Haulage Association. Mr. Barnett. Ruth, what's coming in, what things are they?
They were joint and.
Oh.
That's an NT.
We have a representative from Port of New Zealand. Hello. Amy Burns, is it? You're Jamie and Vance Hodgson. That's me. As you would have picked up. You're at 11:30, so we're running late. We'll certainly hear you before our lunch adjournment. Representative Daniel in the room. Welcome, Mr. Daniel. Ms. Blackwell? Yeah. Okay. Just about the moot point, whether we'll get you before lunch or not. Do you have any particular time constraints? Sorry, it's just been a very busy morning. We're trying to give everyone their opportunity to present their cases. We'll do what we can, but we may take a shorter lunch adjournment. Hey, Mr. Running.
So may I ask, we were scheduled for 12:30. Yes, we've got children.
By 3.
There's going to be people.
Yes, we'll certainly accommodate that. Thank you.
Great.
Good morning, still.
Indeed.
Good to see you in person. If we last saw you in earlier hearing stream online and
Correct.
in the middle of your conference at the time.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that was our 60th anniversary conference. So yeah, can't miss that one, right? Yeah. Exactly.
How are we going to handle this? I'm just conscious that you've made some presentations early on. I don't want to necessarily duplicate that, but
No,
we've got some information and we've got some further evidence from Mr. Hooper.
correct.
So that's probably where our focus will be, but
Sure.
happy for you to set the scene if you.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So we have provided some further information from our previous submissions. So, I guess just conscious of time, I'll just I guess I'll just summarise a few points here. So, as you're aware, so we're concerned about the impact of the proposed plan on relocated buildings moving into or within the area, and in particular the financial bond that's proposed in the proposed plan of 125% of the cost of reinstatement works. And we are concerned about what this impact will have on the relocation home sector and what the wider impact will be on affordable housing in the Wairarapa region. So I guess I just want to set the scene by quoting the judgment in the case that our association took against the Central Otago Council. Can't believe it was 20 years ago now, 2004. So paragraph 22, it says, if there is no ability to impose a bond on a newly built project, there needs to be a reason in effects management terms to impose one on a relocation project. I think it's a pretty clear indication that there needs to be a particular reason. And to me, it's a failing that there's been no analysis of this case when it comes to the proposed plan. And really the Section 240A report certainly refers to the South Taranaki case, which also involved our association. That was an Environment Court appeal. And that's really the sole justification for the 125% bond. And as I understand it, so the reason for the 125% bond is that in case a house that's unfinished needs to be completed by the council. Unfortunately, the 42A report doesn't provide any reason or evidence that this has ever been a problem in any of the council areas, and even if the completion process has ever been contemplated. And the lack of a suitable rationale, I argue that the bond with permitted activity cannot be sustained. So I want to refer, and I guess this is some extra information from the urban one. So this map here that's in my evidence. So really this shows the work that the association has done over the last more than 20 years. The green areas are those that we've engaged with, and the district plans that have permitted activity status for relocates and no bond. So the yellow ones are ones that we're currently engaged with. And of these, so West Coast combined, the Gore, Waimak, Napier, Waitoma and Far North, they all have proposed plans that include permitted and no bond for relocates. The two red ones, I'll just note that they still have controlled status, and really that was due to the association not being aware at the time that they were consulting on their proposed plan. We look forward to engaging with them when they do. And really the reason for including this map is, in my evidence, it points to the fact that South Taranaki and Ruapehu councils are outliers in terms of their controls that include a financial bond. And at the time, these areas were due to the council providing evidence of some uncompleted houses. But in this case, in the Wairarapa, the council have provided no evidence of this. So all the other areas around New Zealand don't have a bond, and I'm challenging the hearings panel to consider good reasons why a regime that promotes good quality but yet affordable housing has to be integrated into the Wairarapa compliant plan. We reject the view that relocated buildings had negative amenity values. That's specifically mentioned in the report. Like any building project, new or recycled, there will be a period when the section will look like a building site, right? However, within a reasonable time frame, and we've suggested in the proposed plan agrees with this 12 months, expected that the house owner will have completed these works. And in the case of relocated building, it could actually be sooner than that. And in the rural zones, it's actually likely that the negative amenity effect during this reinstatement will be in fact reduced compared to other areas. We do have concerns that if a financial bond needs to be supplied to the council for greater than the total reinstatement cost, that this will lead to delays in getting the works done, as the house owner may, for example, need to complete the works themselves, such as painting the house, which is never likely to be on the same timetable as getting a contractor to complete these works. As I mentioned before, some potential relocatable house owners may be put off by the need to provide a large bond in advance alongside the other transport-related bonds. And in my view, this could be contrary to the aim of providing affordable housing in this area. It is more cost-effective for those wishing to place a house on their section by using a recycled one, which works out to be about 1/3 cheaper than a newly constructed one. So as I say in point 9.3 of my evidence, I guess this is where I'm getting to. I challenge the hearing panel to endorse the merits of encouraging recycling of existing housing onto a new site, as long as these comply with the performance standards, some of which are new to this council area, these council areas, but apply no bond. So I say only reserve a bond and resource consent controls for those relocation projects that need to have, for example, a longer time frame than the 12-month time frame and the standard permitted activity status. Only in these type of situations, in my view, is this a correct application of a bond to manage a potential amenity effect, and in terms of that judgment in the Central Otago case. You've heard from me previously about providing the transport route, and I won't go over that again. And really, that's about all I want to say. So I'll hand over to Rebecca now, if you're happy for us to just continue through with our presentations.
We'll take questions at the end.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Rebecca.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Rebecca Howitson and I work for Britain House Movers. And I help our clients with gaining resource or building consent when the time comes, or just generally give them information to get them started. We either work through the whole process to just setting them on their way. The role basically came about because it was taking too long for the public to work out where to go, how to get to their desired result of a approved consent. When asked to prepare evidence to support the New Zealand Heavy Haulage Association submission, the removal of the performance bond, I was keen to be involved in that as it's such an important topic for our industry. Since the removal of bonds in other districts, it's a process that we felt needed addressing for the Wairarapa Council as well. Not only do we notice the consent process being more streamlined and faster and consistent, we often find clients are a little bit more relaxed, knowing their budgeted funds are in their hands, I guess, to choose where they spend the money at any stage of their works. I've had a contact with a handful of our past clients who have actively assisted me with my evidence, and other examples I've just collected photographs around the district. Example 3 outlined how the 125% performance bond could impact the consent holder by adding an additional $4,000 to their work, and example 6 potentially could have added $47,000 worth of bonds prior to commencement of work. My experience with our clients is that they are generally on a budget, and to outlay these additional funds for bonds could hinder not only the completion of the reinstatement works, but the ability to even get started. While speaking with the consent holders, they were often unsure what bonds they had paid, including when and how they could apply for them back. In addition, the applications of different types of bonds was uneven, and when added together, reinstatements plus vehicle crossings and footpath bonds would be a large amount of money to be paid up front to the council. Further, I could see the impact of imposing the 125% performance bond being another administrative task, not only for council, but the client and myself. I can also see the potential of this bond being inconsistent, and for a large part of our client base, that would be unachievable. During my time on the road gathering evidence, no matter what stage the consent holder was at, what I did see were houses that were made into homes, which I felt reiterated the need for greater ease on relocatable houses in the district. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name's Russell Hooper. I'm a local planning consultant. And I've been involved on both sides of the fence when it comes to relocated buildings. So one, working at a council, dealing with the processing, resource consents and setting and refunding bonds. And also on the other side, assisting applicants with resource consents for relocated buildings. So based on this experience, I note the following. In terms of the best use of the bond money, in my opinion, the vast majority of people just want to complete the reinstatement work as quickly as possible. And the best use of the bond money is to go towards this reinstatement directly. And the proposed bond of 125% of the reinstatement work is generally higher than the current practice. The council currently sets bonds and will be more difficult for the homeowners to fund. In terms of enforcement, in my experience, there were very few complaints about relocated dwellings. I do recall following up on reinstatement work, but do not recall any third-party complaints. I'm not aware of any examples of bonds actually being used to undertake uncompleted or reinstatement work. So in my opinion, rather than burden all relocate projects with bonds, the council is better off using the RMA enforcement procedures, typically through an abatement notice, to address the very few which do become an issue. Confusion. As Rebecca has pointed out, there are building consent bonds and resource consent bonds. This is a great source of confusion for people. Building consent bond is returned at CCC stage, A typical mum and dad applicant does not realise that there are multiple bonds, so the second resource consent bond is often forgotten. To make matters more confusing, the building consent bond covers damage to council infrastructure. Resource consent bond generally also has a component which covers damage to council infrastructure. When people don't know that they have a bond outstanding, it can sit with the council for a number of years. If the property has changed hands, it can be difficult to return the bond. It's my understanding that the bond needs to be refunded to the person that paid it rather than the new owner, even if the new owner carried out the work. That just adds a complexity and difficulty. So administration burden. Bond monitoring and returns are a time-consuming administration task for the council. Removing bonds would free up council officer time for other tasks. The administration of returning a bond is generally charged to the homeowner, adding costs to a housing project. A bond return could potentially involve $400 of council administration fees. This all adds to the cost of the actual establishing the house. So in my opinion, there is no need for a bond to be included as a permitted standard. And removal of the bond will align the Wairarapa with the majority of the country and provide a more streamlined, cost-effective and efficient process for relocated building projects. Thank you.
Mr. Hooper. Thank you all. Any questions from the panel? To my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My question is basically if there are no bonds applied and the house owner does not meet his obligations, i.e. the 12-month or whatever period we put in there, you have indicated some comeback that the council has, but other than the special bonds or the RMA, this, it could be an unfinished project that's either sitting on piles and not finished, or still sitting in the air, not even down on piles. In the area at the moment, I know of instances of this, and at the moment we've basically got no comeback apart from the RMA, which is an expensive and long process. So yeah, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think whether you had a bond or not, I don't think that would change those couple of examples. I think, I think there are the RMA provisions to address those few examples. I don't think the bond would change.
So
a couple of examples.
Enforcing the withholding of the bond, you don't think would have any effect?
I don't think it's worth doing that to burden the rest of the relocates for the bond.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess Rebecca's evidence was that, that often people are confused about what the bonds are for and they don't even know to get them back. So how that's going to be a motivating factor, I don't know.
That was my question. I mean, how easy is it the problem to get the bond back? You mentioned that there's a lot of bonds sitting in there and people don't get it back. They don't know that it's in there. Is that because it's a big process to get the bonds back from the council?
I think it's just the process fully involved in, the building consent applications and the resource consents. It's just a big, complicated process, and they don't understand how the bond system works.
In my experience, getting the bond back is really easy. It is a really easy process, and council are really forthcoming at giving it back if you provide the evidence needed. I think there's just a barrier for clients. It's easy for me because I sit at my computer, I can flick some photos away and I can communicate really well. But for the average trying to do your home up, take the kids to school and go to work every day, like that's a huge barrier, and you've paid these invoices. And what I've found just by, speaking to our clients is they've forgotten they've done that. That's my job every day. So Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, kind of follow on from that with the bond process, and this is, I understand that people might not know what their bonds are paid for, but surely that would be part of an automatic, and I guess I'm looking to the officers here, council process, is that when you've had your building consent signed off, that your house has been completed, that will automatically generate a refund of the bond anyway? I'm guessing, wouldn't it?
Because there's
Probably,
two,
yeah, I was going to say, you're probably talking about the building section and compared to the RM, the resource consent section, and probably those two don't really talk
Yeah.
well.
So I've just also had a quick look because I'm conscious of some properties that are relocated buildings that have been years and years and years and they're still not finished.
Right.
So I've just had a quick checkup of the abatement notice process on the RMA, and I think again that's sort of doesn't look to me to be an easy thing for councils to really instigate, because people can just ignore it. So how.
There is one of my examples, and there was one where I worked closely with and received the bonds back. One of them was during this process because I also didn't realise they had paid it. So at the time of code of compliance, yes, the council did automatically send that email to say you can apply for your bond back now, which was a good prompt. Then the other side of that, it was the resource consent. So for the reinstatement works, the code of compliance has been applied for, and the reinstatement work would have finished prior to that, and that bond was never. That was something I found out during this process hadn't been refunded. So I just during that process, pointing out that they're all called different things. You get in the resource consent, you're being asked to a 5,000 reinstatement bond, but you're getting invoiced for a vehicle crossing bond. It's very confusing even for myself. Yeah. Yeah.
So the issue of bond is arguably risk management. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Why should the council take the risk for a private development of a person? Why should the ratepayers take that risk as opposed to the person who's doing the job?
The same could apply for a new build, and the council takes the same risk, right? I understand what you're saying, but it's the same thing, and I guess that's where I go back to the judgment 2004. That's what the judge said. If you don't apply one to a new build, why apply it to a relocate, right? If there's a reason for it, then fine. But we don't know these examples that are there. Did they have a bond applied? But we don't have that level of information to know whether that was an issue or not, whether a bond is a motivating factor or not, right? I guess, listen, we've just been through the review of Central Otago again, right? From 2004, and they've just done it over the last couple of years, right? And they have retained their status. Right? To me, that's an endorsement of the process that the court put in place 20 years ago, and that has been adopted, as you can see, by most councils nationwide. So I guess, yes, the council is willing to take that risk. But I guess also the process by which things happen now is not what happened in the past, right? So what was the controls, what was the communication, what was the consents that were required for the ones that were not reinstated compared to the, the engagement that Rebecca does now on behalf of clients and make sure that everything is done, So that is, I think we're in a different phase now. And that's really what, like I say, I'm challenging you guys to think, okay, where are we heading with this? Not where have we been? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett-Thompson. Certainly, Mr. Horrell, directed to consider the comments from the judge in the Central Otago case.
Great. Yep.
We understand what he was saying, that there needs to be a resource management effect for a standard or a condition to apply to.
Mhm.
So, and you're saying, you're suggesting to us that there's not such an effect to be controlled by the bond.
Hasn't been demonstrated for this area. Yep.
Next question, Ms. Howardson, the 15 or 17 examples that you gave of bonds in this area, were they any of those I wasn't too clear, any of those resource management bonds, or are they all building consent, vehicle crossing type bonds? Are you able to name that?
I did try and identify that. Yes, so there was a combination of both. The way they were invoiced was different. So yeah, so if we refer to the table, I sort of wrote how they were invoiced, but then the description I had put in how they came about. So whether that was through the resource consent or the building consent. And they differ between the three councils of how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Barnett Thompson, you've said that where a bond might be necessary is where the 12-month period is not signed up to.
Hmm.
And I'm just reading the wording of that clause E in your appendix to 1.
Yep.
The owner of the site on which the relocated building is placed shall certify that the reinstatement work will be completed in the 12-month period. How do you envisage, or how have you experienced that sort of clause working?
It's interesting. So like in a lot of
permitted activity.
Yeah, that's right. So, but I guess what we're saying is if you can't comply with those permitted activity performance standards, then you default to like a restricted discretion which is proposed. But that's the only scenario in which we would support it.
No, I understand that, but what I'm trying to understand is how that standard would operate in practice.
So
it's something that would be tested at the building consent stage, given that there'll be no need for a resource consent if the applicant thought they complied with standards A through to whatever. D.
Yes, I guess that's right. That would be an engagement, really, wouldn't it, between your building section and your resource consent section? And I guess it would need to be the applicant identifying that, yep, they can't comply with those standards. So if they can't comply with those ones, then I guess they'd have to say, be advised that, yep, you need a resource consent.
So Mr. Hooper, in your experience as a planning officer, building consent comes in for relocated building, the compliance staff would assess that as to whether it needed a resource consent, presumably.
Yes.
And when they come to clause E, would they seek a certification statement relating to that 12-month period?
If there was a permitted standard, they would. Yeah.
I guess this is one of the new controls, isn't it? And this one compared to the operative one. Yep. Yep. So it is a new process. Yeah.
Okay, and you're saying that where that certification failed to be given, that the council would be with the council then imposing performance bond. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right. So then it would not be permitted activity. It would be restricted discretionary, and then those other controls would be available to the council.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yes, yes.
And so there wouldn't need to be a rule specifying that unless it was an either or situation. Could E be established as an either or? Either the owner gives that certification, so they provide the bond.
No, because I think it's in 5. So under the matters of discretion. So yeah, so matters of discretion where you can't comply with permitted, then that's where the performance bond comes in.
Yes, okay, but I'm talking about performance standards on a permitted activity.
All right.
If the performance standard was expressed in the either or,
I see.
and you either had to certify that you're going to complete the works in 12 months.
Yeah.
Or if you didn't certify that, you paid the bond. He still became a permitted activity either way.
Right.
That's something you've given any consideration to?
We hadn't. I guess we were more sealing these in silos, right? So you'd either comply with all of these, or if you can't, then you comply with those other ones, which include a bond.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would the matters of discretion would try and ascertain the need for and the value of the bond, presumably, if you don't comply.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it would be, yeah, like it doesn't specify in this, to be honest, but yeah, I guess it would be on the same sort of basis, wouldn't it? You know, what's the reinstatement cost? Yeah. Yeah. But
and you're happy with the restricted discretionary activity status for that?
Yes, where the bond is applied, yeah.
Thank you. That was all from me. Is there anything further? All for your time.
No problem, thank you. Yep.
Why am I?
Thanks. What's the next? New Zealand. Welcome, and Hodgson, Burns, and we've got Ms. Levinson online.
Mr. Chair, I'll have to apologise for Emily Levinson. She flew back into the country from leave this morning and is unable to. So, if there are any questions from the panel of Ms. Levinson, the Horticulture New Zealand industry evidence, then she's happy to provide a supplementary statement.
We can put any questions that we have in writing to her via Ruth.
Thank you.
Who's going to kick off?
Oh, I'll kick off. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Kia ora. Vance Hodgson. I'm a planning consultant for Horticulture New Zealand, and I've done that for about 12 years with Horti NZ. And if you've probably seen from the evidence I've submitted, I also do the same for the Pork Industry Board.
Yes.
Some issues, I guess, meat and veg and fruit, but reverse sensitivity, primary production, all those sort of all those topics. So, yeah, that's me, and I've got one of the Hort Industries fantastic food producers here, Jamie Burnsky, who's a local apple grower. So that the two of us will cover off today.
We've got a copy of your evidence in chief, as we have for Ms. Levinson. We've got a statement from Jamie?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Do you have any supplementary summary notes there?
I'd like to, if I could, just to highlight that I've read the officer's reply or opening statement, which has addressed a number of the issues that I raised in my planning evidence. And we've landed in the same place. So, yeah, I endorse the findings of the report writer. Particularly, I agree with the report. The rule structure for artificial crop protection structures. And I'm sorry for dumping a whole lot of sort of examples from around the country of the various rule structures that are around, and provided the Waikato District Council consent order example, which I think is a fairly reasonable approach that deals with the need for these structures in our rural environment. Addresses the sensitivity, the reverse sensitivity potential of dwellings relative to that primary production activity, and also the landscape concerns through the use of colours, which is something that we're seeing roll out around the country. That use of darker cloth or materials on the sides and a white on the top. So yeah, endorse the recommendation of the Section 42A report writer there. Likewise, supporting the findings in terms of seasonal workers accommodation. Had no problem with the rule. The issue was primarily around the limitation of those activities to not be on highly productive land. And as I've set out in my evidence, in all of the examples that I've worked on around the country, those activities are on highly productive land because they need to be, there adjacent to or on the resource actually, because they are a supporting activity, which the officer and I have identified as a supporting activity in terms of 3.9 of the National Policy Statement, but highly productive land. And the only other matter to really point out is, I raised some evidence in regards to visitor accommodation. It's an activity that, I mean, it seems innocuous. It's something that fits in well with our rural environment. You know, people quite rightly enjoy those the Airbnbs and the accommodation in our rural environment that leverages off the amenity and provides the homestays and all those sorts of things. It's just
a residential visitor accommodation as opposed to other visitor accommodation.
Correct. Yes.
The tuition, the setback, and the occupancy.
That's right. Now, the officer and I have agreed in terms of applying the setback.
Yes.
I raised an additional issue in regards to looking at a maximum occupancy, which is a method that is, or a control that's used in a number of plans around the country. But look, on review and considering the officer's reply, I'm happy that the definition is tight enough that this is an incidental activity to the primary residential use of the site, so that combined with the setback, there's no need for the occupancy maximum as well. So, yeah, in short, there's no disagreement there. I mean, these issues in my evidence is primarily dealing, obviously, with this tension that exists in our rural environment, providing for our primary production activities and those sensitive activities that are in that environment as well. You know, I didn't get into rural subdivision heavily in terms of my evidence. Neither did Hort NZ, but my grounding is at planners in the former Franklin District Council that's now disappeared. So we were grappling with issues of highly productive land and rural subdivision all through my career up there as a planner through to a senior planner councillor, sitting where the officer is trying to deal with what is the right minimum lot size, where do we provide our countryside living zones, and what methods do we use? You know, the issue that we ended up with in that area was a significant latent potential, which related to former subdivision rules that established a number of lots in the rural environment that didn't have dwellings on them, but had the right to erect a dwelling. So we were having to get into transferable titles and all of that complex system to try and deal with it.
A valuable resource to have in front of us. The other three that I'm aware of, plans that are going through the process at the moment, Far North, 4 District, the combined West Coast plan, and there may be one other. Have you been involved in all of those?
Far North, yes, Far North.
Gore and West Coast?
Not Gore and West Coast, no.
Of the highly productive land is probably less relevant on the West Coast, but certainly of relevance down in Gore.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. Far North District Council have gone to a proposed horticultural zoning to try and deal with that particular activity and HPL.
What stage of the plan process that they had?
Hearings at the moment, yeah.
As is the West Coast, yes. And I think the other one that's just kicked off is the Timaru.
Timaru, yes, I'm involved in that.
Okay, well, look, I really appreciate the way in which you've summarised the material. I certainly appreciate the practical approach you've adopted to the visitor accommodation matter with the setback, doing the heavy lifting, so to speak, in terms of managing reverse sensitivity. I don't have any particular questions of you on those matters, so I'll just check with the panel.
No, I'm all good on that.
We probably move to Ms. Burns' evidence. Is there anything that you'd like to particularly highlight in your statement?
Well, as a primary producer, particularly in horticulture, the RSE accommodation. So RSE stands for Recognised Seasonal Employer. So it's a specific visa that allows horticultural activities to bring, or horticulturists to bring in workers from the Pacific on a 7-month visa.
Okay.
There's no limit on how many times the workers can actually come into the country, but they can only be here for a 7-month period at any one time. Now, part of our RSC licence, which gets renewed every 5 years from immigration, is that we must provide accommodation for our staff. And that is to remove the burden of us putting seasonal workers into houses or dwellings that really should be fit for New Zealanders to be renting. So we're not depleting the rental stock with seasonal worker accommodation. So that's one of the reasons why that they are generally built on our own land. It means that workers can be there on site for us, which ours are. So in particular with our orchard in the South Wairarapa, and also too with Craigie Range out in Martinborough, our accommodation is built on site for us, so the workers can just go backwards and forwards. The other thing that we need to be particularly careful is we have a huge duty bound to be culturally sensitive to people we're bringing in. In our case, we have a licence for 80. So bringing in 80 Samoans and popping them in the middle of Greytown wouldn't necessarily be the best environment for the workers themselves. Having them like we have, where we've actually got a purpose-built accommodation area for them, where they can live like they traditionally live at home, is far better for them. They feel less, they feel more secure being able to live by themselves rather than actually live one house here, one house there in town, which would happen if we rented them. So that was probably another consideration that MB put into us, forcing us to our own worker accommodation. So it is actually a condition of our immigration licence that we have the seasonal workers. Regarding the netting around our orchards and our vineyards, we currently have the largest netting structure in New Zealand in one place, South Wairarapa. There are now becoming areas with it. A lot of advantages to our protecting our crops. It not only protects from wind, bird, hail, which is what our crop has mainly done, but with this having the invention of having the side cloth like we've done as well, it also stops that spray drift coming out of there, which is also another environmental impact that we're trying to eliminate as well. Our cloth has actually been up since 2008, and Martinborough, actually, the council out at Martinborough decided to net the tip as well out there to stop the anything from blowing outside the tipped area. So, it's proof that it's actually got great versatility for other industries and other businesses in there. So we're very pleased with you allowing us to have, because we really do need it 6 metres to encompass our properties.
Right.
So thank you.
And thank Mr. Horrell for that. Panel, any questions?
No.
Nothing? Sounds like
It was very,
From South Africa. It's massive.
I'd say very informative evidence. Thank you.
thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Councillors, commissioners.
I've got to get back to the points and then I then would suggest.
She's talking.
I'm just there.
Gallery, what I was thinking with the indulgence of the Daniel Party is whether we might hear from Ms. Delby Neal now before lunch. You've been allocated 15 minutes and that will allow you to meet your 2:30 deadline. Yeah, Mr. Daniel, is that going to sit okay with you? Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks on this.
Just your.
Yeah, so I've just got, I submitted a brief statement supporting justice statement on Thursday. I don't know whether it came through. It was prepared in the school holidays while Gus was dropping. So I did run a map for a map, and it's attached to the back, but we'll speak to it, so you shouldn't have to read it. But the map is just to put us in context. We are the blue dots.
The blue dot.
We are the blue dot, and the overlay is there. And because you are unable to, on the council maps, overlay the overlay over the soil maps, I've done that underneath. I've provided an S map underneath, which will give you an idea of where the soil in where I want to discuss lays. Thanks. Yes.
don't rush unnecessarily. Airtime. But just interested, yeah, that you've submitted some information to the council. I don't know that that's come through.
It's attached on the back of what you've had.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just I'll read it.
Yeah, there was a PDF, just.
That PDF.
Yeah, so I can resend that through.
No, it looks like I'm the only one that hasn't got it.
It should be in your most recent.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
this little preview, which.
Yeah, there were a couple of typos in it because I submitted it while the children were bouncing off the wall, so this is just a revised and content. And while Gus is working full-time docking, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Short periods are right.
Yeah.
Okay, why don't you start by just giving us some context in terms of who you are, where you're located,
Sure.
and
Sure.
we can move on to your main issues soon.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and tēnā koroa. I am Lindley Selby Neal. I have a Bachelor of Science, and my husband Gus Beard has a Bachelor of Resource Studies from Lincoln University. We have combined experience working for various councils across Aotearoa. Gus has worked for Opus International in a planning role. I've worked for land surveyors, and we've both worked for the Department of Conservation, broadly covering resource management, strategic and community planning, land, soil and biodiversity management on Gus's behalf. It's been over 11 years since we've been in any of those roles, so this is the first for me. We both have lived experience on farms and orchards, myself in Marlborough, and we've been sheep and beef farming in Martinborough for 11 years. 8 years of those we've been leasing farms, so it's our own business. Right. I have been in Martinborough since 1989 on and off, so it's 35 years. So I've watched the town change from parking my Valiant on the side of the road to now. So we own 101A Shooting Butts Road. It's 3.5 hectares. We've owned it since 2009, and this is our only property. So this is our future. So far, we've planted 1,000 natives on the property, and we've got another 1,000 to go in a restoration project we're doing on the Lowline stream. We speak today in support of our submission regarding the Martinborough Soils Overlay. The Soils Overlay directly impacts us. Our property is bound on all sides by 46 existing or recently consented lifestyle sections, including 1 and 2 hectare lots. We also wish to be able to realise the potential value in our property through the option of subdivision. As stated in our submission, we request the overlay be removed from our property because our property does not have unique soil and climate characteristics suitable for high value crops. This is evident in the 1974 map that Derek prepared. You met Derek yesterday and I zoomed in on that meeting, and I've talked to Mr. Auburn as well. He contacted Dr. Mill, yeah, and Wilco and Alistair and also John. John I know from a past life in Martinborough and as well. So some of the lots around us, the interim soil maps, the S-map online. So the S-map, that is the second map that you have. This all previous knowledge regarding soils, and it's prepared by Landcare Research. So Derek's map, the 1974 map is a founding document in here, but what this map does is it allows you to look at it quite clearly, visually. You can see that the brown is the free draining soil, travels around the back of Martinborough, including the areas that Mr. Mill and Mr. Porter identified where their vineyards were. Mr. Byrne identified their vineyards yesterday. And then it travels on down to Moona Road where the overlay extends to. We are located at the red dot, which is this extension of the overlay into the blue, not well-draining soil. And we also have evidence regarding the soil of our site gained through the 4 years that we've worked the land, planted it and fenced upon it, through conversation with local wine growers, through nearby vineyard trials that have failed, and the recent sale of land in our area without interest from the viticulture industry. The application of the overlay as a buffer, I feel, is inconsistent, ambiguous, and unnecessary. I can talk more to that, but I'll move on the main points. The overlay in part is already fragmented. If we look at particular on the front map, we have Dublin Street Vineyard. This is a standalone vineyard. It is existing. None of its neighbours are subject to the overlay. We have been advised that our land, though it not highly productive, has been included because our neighbours could potentially have highly productive land. There is inconsistencies. There are also sufficient measures, as I know you touched on yesterday with Mr. Porter, and you've talked to Mr. Shaw largely about it today, within the general rural zone provision to safeguard productive soils and rural character without restricting our use of our property. In our situation, for example, the balance lot requirements, they would be 2.5 potentially, but because we have a clay pan, a hard pan, we wouldn't be able to service a 5,000 square metre hectare, a half hectare lot. So we would probably be looking at 1 or just over 1 with a balance lot of 2.5. And the balance of that 2.5 is low-lying stream area, so the house lot would sit on the top of the roll. Speculative. I'd like to point out in the section 42 idles, I can touch also, it's Mr. Milne did at the end of our submission talk to better alternative areas for subdivision and that our land within Martinborough. So I can say that our property contributes to the economic wellbeing of Martinborough because we can develop a lot without compromising productive soils and nor burdening already at capacity services. Just quickly, one point picked up in the section 42A report is the author stated there'd been no site-specific assessments undertaken for productive capacity with regard to the Martinborough soils overlay. The section 32A evaluation raised this issue and suggested the need for further qualified input to refine the extent of the overlay. To our knowledge, this was not carried out. As our submission, including Mr. Milne's soil report for our property detailed, we have carried out a site-specific assessment and submitted that report. I'm not going to talk myself to the change of activity status. Gus can probably do that, or we'll take questions on that at the end. But I will just summarise that the change in activity status, while we think it appears excessive and subjects us, the applicant, to an uncertain and costly consenting process. I'll conclude the following communication with council officers, with Botham Municipal planners and the Waincross community to determine why our property is included within the overlay. We find that the overlay in our case lacks evidence, has been prepared without due process, is inconsistent, is inappropriate and is excessive. Suitably qualified soil scientist has described the soil within our property as unsuitable for viticulture, having clayey subsoils with imperfect drainage and waterlogging. That was Dr. Milne's report that we submitted. Our land is distinguishable from existing viticulture and land identified as suitable for viticulture and other high-value crops. The underlying general rural zone has suitable policy to manage the potential subdivision of our property, and we request that the overlay be removed from our property at 101A Shooting Butts Road.
Just before we hear from Mr. Laird, just in relation to that soils report, did you say that you submitted that already?
That was our submission, attached to our submission.
Yep.
And who was the author of that report?
Who you talked to yesterday.
What was the date of that report?
Take our submissions read. I'll just give you the
No, it's
formally Derek Milne. Has submitted. When did we make our submission?
it was only written a few weeks before.
Oh, yeah. So he visited the site on Saturday, December the 2nd of just the year being
23.
3.
Yeah.
And he did site.
When we did a pit.
Yep.
A lot of information's come in with.
No, totally. Yeah.
Riddle. It's Good. It's take on the lead and then we've got any questions.
I'm happy to answer questions, really. I don't think I've got anything to add.
This is full-time farming, so I've been trying to wade through this, and here's my sounding board. But
Yeah.
can probably answer questions
So
on foundation and planning.
Yeah, as far as the change in status, for the overlay, so for a subdivision for the less than 4 hectare rule, with the overlay, it becomes discretionary, and without it, it's controlled. So from our point of view, there's a significant difference in the value of our property between those two things, and a high level of uncertainty if it's discretionary. The other thing I'll point out, the soils overlay here, I'm going to hold it up. This patch here, there are no vineyards in that patch, nowhere.
It's known verbatim in Martinborough that land is unsuitable for a wide range of uses.
We struggled, there's some process issues for sure. We struggled to get any justification when this first came out about why this bit was lumped in with this. And eventually in the 42A report, there was some admission that it doesn't have high value soils, but then there was some issues with buffer from what, and then some fragmentation. So I suppose I'm speculating because we just haven't been told what the actual issue is with that piece of land versus that. And if you overlay the soil, of course, apart from that one vineyard, and that could be an error, all of the vineyards are within that free draining area.
Glad you raised that matter because I was getting a little bit confused based on the evidence you did from Mr. Abraham yesterday. I think the difference between your property and the property at Nelson Road is the presence of highly productive soils at the.
Yes.
I did comment in here, but I didn't want to give too much talk because it's not my profession. But the discretion standard, the standard for the discretionary activity is that we will meet the requirements of the National Policy Statement, Highly Productive Land, Clause 3.8, being the retention of highly productive land. So it is our obligation in a consenting, costly, uncertain consenting process to give evidence that we don't have highly productive land. However, we can tell you we don't have highly productive land at this stage. And so it's an unnecessary burden, and it's, in my opinion, excessive.
Just one more thing. There was 9 hectares of this land was sold in 2019.
Yes.
It was subsequently subdivided. We bought 3.6, and our neighbour was 1.2 hectares, and that's been sold twice since. No viticultural interests have ever shown any interest. And actually the 9 hectares sold for less than $1 million. So that just tells you about how keen people were to buy it.
And the block at the end of Shooting Butts Road.
Yep.
Subdivided.
Well, yes, that's the Rapiki development. That's 39 consented lots.
How big are those lots?
Are there 4 onwards? However, our neighbours on the Martinborough side of us, so Whitney and Wendy, they've got a 2 hectare, 3 hectare and a 4 hectare, and then the next neighbour's got a 1 hectare and a 4 hectare, all recently consented pre-plan change. Yeah.
And plus there's 1.2.
Oh, the immediate neighbour is 1.2 existing.
Yeah.
That's a Wellington.
It's a match. Yeah.
Am I correct in what I've just said? With the removal of if the overlay was removed, would the subdivision described revert to a controlled activity?
So it is also located over highly productive lands.
It is.
LUC 2.
2.
And no, it wouldn't. It would still be subject to that status.
Yeah.
Discretionary.
Yes.
But not subject to the overlay.
Right. Yeah, and we've already done work with soil scientists to demonstrate it's not highly productive. I've been farming for 11 years here, and it's actually not very good farmland either. It's very poor drainage.
Is it correct that some of the vineyards on that road that were established some time ago have been removed?
There was a trial around Shooting Butts, so around the corner, and that failed.
Hawkins, what happened to the Hawkins
That's all.
Jake and Kirsty line? Is it?
No,
It's
that,
still going, but that's a
that-
lot further down the road.
that's not, I'm not sure if that's within the 144 Dublin Streets vineyard or if it's excluded and it's just not in there. I couldn't quite tell, but no, it's around along Shooting Butts Road along the Coltons area.
Yes, it'll be outside of that grey area.
It's completely outside of it. It's well into the blue zone, yeah. And the next map as well, and yeah.
One of the things that's coming through on this hearing is the difference between land use classifications that were derived from back in the 1980s under the land registry, and that have been carried over through into the current data, are yet to be reviewed by the regional council through review of the regional policy statement. So that's a historical classification that is still, various reasons, current versus the reality of what's on each site in terms of productive land. And that's the conundrum that's facing us as a panel.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
I've worked many years with overlays, and this one, there's we can't find any evidence why this has been included in that overlay. That's incredibly frustrating from a process point of view. I've got many emails trying to track that down, but
I was referring not so much to the overlay, but to the land use classification
The underlying
system that applies to your land. In this case, a UC2. You dispute that, obviously.
well,
we
we've had a soil scientist. We don't personally dispute it.
No, but yeah,
But we can do that in a consenting process if due and necessary versus having to do the overlay again and come up against an additional set of submissions and notified parties that will have another.
and that's the key issue for you in
Yeah.
terms of asking for the overlay to be removed.
Yeah, and there was a comment that removing our block would fragment the overlay, but my response to that is the whole of that block that's actually, it hasn't been investigated. We investigated our block because that's what we've got the most issue with, but I mean, this block sits outside the mapped high value soils, all of it, but there's been no on-site assessment, any qualified, and that was in the 32 report. There was a comment made, and that comment in itself indicates that they thought they hadn't done enough assessment of it.
Can I just clarify, looking at that, you've got two more properties to the east that are involved in the block, is that right?
No, we only have one property,
Oh, no,
sorry.
there are.
Where I put this up to they have existing consent for, the text where I've got the two lots and the 3 lots. They're consented subdivisions and 2 hectare, 3 hectare properties. And then the surrounding Rapaki farm has got.
I'm trying to work out which is your property.
The red dot.
Yeah, but then there's another.
The red dot, we have a neighbouring 1 hectare and then there's a 3.5 that wraps around as well.
Yeah, that's.
So you've got two properties
No,
Between us and Rapaki, yes.
within the.
no, there's 1, 2.
Come on, show me.
Yeah, that's not clear, I agree. Or as far as lots go, there's about 11.
That's your property there.
You can't see it under that red dot.
That's a
Yeah,
property.
that's a neighbour.
Yeah.
That's a neighbour.
So
Yeah.
those two are still, so you're asking for this part to be removed out of.
Just that one rectangle, because we have not spoken for anyone else because
Yeah.
We can go back.
we are self-funding. Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Just to wrap things up, you're one of at least 4 that have requested deletion of the overlay. We've heard from Dublin Wines, we've heard from Porter yesterday. The horrible was the other one.
Else.
Yes. So I don't know if we're hearing from or not. The Horrell will report back to us having heard your evidence today. We'll see that information. Site visit of the entirety of the overlay area. And we'll deliberate and we'll be issuing a decision following the final wrap-up hearing, which is scheduled for about May next year. So that process.
So you are going to seek further expert advice?
We need to discuss that as a panel.
Yeah, because I think my experience going on a site visit without someone being able to point out
It's just
geological.
familiarisation
Yeah, okay,
license for us.
Yeah.
It's not a substitute for
sure.
expert advice.
But I suppose that's my point, that the expert advice hasn't been done in this case, apart from we've done one
Soil perhaps.
soil
And
with a,
Derek,
there's been no other soil scientist involved in this that we're aware of.
and then at Mr. Porter's property on Nelson.
Yeah, he as well, Derek Mount as well there.
We'll decide whether we've got sufficient information
Yeah.
to make a decision or whether we should do the work.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll break for lunch now.
Thank you.
We'll break for lunch now. And we'll come back and hear from the Daniel Party. Thank you.
1:30.
I think 1:30.